I have the honor of introducing to you Dawn Adès. She is a professor emerita at the University of Essex, a fellow of the British Academy, a former trustee of Tate and the National Gallery, professor of history of art at the Royal Academy, and was made commander of the British Empire in 2013 for her services to higher education. Adès has curated and co-curated many exhibitions in the UK and internationally over the past 40 years, including Dada and Surrealism Reviewed, Art in Latin America, the Salvador Dali Century, Undercover Surrealism, Georges Battier, and Documents, Dali in Duchamp at the Royal Academy in 2017. And apart from the catalogues of these other exhibitions, publications include Photomontage, that was reissued, came out again in 2022. Marcel Duchamp in 1999, also reissued 2022, and Selected Writings on Art and Anti-Art. Her research on Dada and Surrealism has focused increasingly on women artists and poets associated with these movements, with publications on Hannah Hoch, Mina Loy, María Izquierdo, Frida Kahlo, Leonora Carrington, and Claude Cahun. We look forward for your lecture. Thank you very much. María Izquierdo, feminist, surrealist, revolutionary.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and apologies for speaking in English. I'm sorry. Thank you so much to Monica Pestel, director of the museum, and to Ilana and Daniela for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure. I just need to qualify the subtitle of this lecture. Can everyone hear? All right. Yes. Feminist, surrealist, and revolutionary really needs a question mark at the end, because it's not quite so clear that she is all those three things. We will see. So pain experienced by women, violence against women, were significant subjects for María Izquierdo and for her better-known contemporary, Frida Kahlo. María Izquierdo was the first woman in post-revolutionary Mexico to live independently from her earnings as a painter. She developed her own version of feminism and a highly individual response to the cultural nationalism that held sway at the time, making a spirited challenge to the muralists who dominated official art in Mexico since the end of the revolution in 1920. The most famous were known as Los Tres Grandes, Diego Rivera, David Alfaro Siqueiros, and José Clemente Orozco. But I want to distinguish Orozco from the others as being much closer to Izquierdo in spirit and in his skepticism. Izquierdo's Dream and Foreboding of 1947 and Kahlo's The Wounded Deer of 1946 expressed personal suffering through violent imagery. Kahlo adopts the metaphor of the hunt, with herself as the wounded animal. A tram accident when Kahlo was only 18 led to years of painful medical treatment, operations, and miscarriages, which she treated with extraordinary directness and spirit, as in Tree of Hope, Stand Firm, the painting on the right-hand side. Izquierdo's late painting, Dream and Foreboding, is a grim image, which may well have had its origins in a dream, though I'm not going to try to analyze it from that point of view. She holds her own severed head from a window by the tresses of hair, which coil round the roots of trees spilling from another window, with severed heads suspended from them. Often interpreted in terms of personal suffering, it is also related to a traumatic incident in her professional life, to memories of the violence of the revolution of 1910 to 20, to her deep commitment to an idea of Mexico, and to despair at the failure of the hopes the revolution had held out for women. Dream and Foreboding has an iconographical predecessor in one of a group of very strange works from the mid-1930s by Izquierdo, entitled Allegory of Liberty, 1937. Here, a flying female figure holds a torch in one hand and several severed female heads by the hair in the other. This group of works includes another allegory, this time Allegory of Work, and a painting entitled Saturn. All are frankly puzzling images, though they share the theme of female suffering. It's been suggested by the art historian Raquel Thibault that they were a response to the end of Izquierdo's relationship with the painter Rufino Tamayo, with whom she had lived and shared a studio between 1929 and 1933. Thibault describes the following years as a period of deep heartache, during which, and I quote, Izquierdo's work is pervaded by a tortured pain never before seen in her work. Women appear almost always naked in attitudes of extreme anguish. The biography may well be relevant, but I think the symbolism of these paintings can't be reduced to private heartache, and I would argue reflects conflicting ideas of the possible and actual position of women following the Mexican Revolution. The revolutionary rhetoric paid lip service to the equality of women in every walk of life, but at the same time prioritized masculine virility as incarnating the spirit of the revolution, leaving woman's role ambiguous at best. In The Labyrinth of Solitude, Octavio Paz's famous study of the problem of national identity and its psychological aspects in Mexico, the binary conception of society in masculine, feminine terms is traced back to the trauma of the Spanish conquest of Mexico in the early 16th century. Cortes and his so-called Indian mistress, the Mayan woman known as La Malinche, are seen here in Orozco's 1926 mural from the National Preparatory School as the parents of a mestizo Mexico. They are male and female, Spanish and Indian. Cortes's gesture is ambiguous, protective and imprisoning the female, but either way, she stands for, and I quote, female passivity, which opened the country to foreign invasion, in contrast to male power. She is, moreover, regarded as a traitor. Paz writes, her passivity causes her to lose her identity. She loses her name. She is no one. She disappears into nothingness. And yet, she is the cruel incarnation of the feminine condition. In 1935, on the occasion of an itinerant exhibition of revolutionary posters by the female sector of the School of Fine Art in Mexico City, Izquierdo made an important statement. The exhibition opened in Guadalajara, where this photo was taken, and Maria is standing in the center, and beside her another wonderful Mexican photographer, Lola Alvarez Bravo. At the launch of the exhibition, a journalist asked about the role of women in revolutionary struggle. Izquierdo's answer was luckily recorded, and I quote, above all, women must unite and fight together strongly to improve their condition. Women have to cease being luxury objects and transform themselves into a factor within the class struggle. They ought to evolve socially and participate directly in the revolutionary struggle. This statement is in line with the apparently clear message of muralists, like that of Diego Rivera in the painting on the right-hand side. Women here in Rivera's mural in the National Preparatory School in Mexico City are active in the interests of a social revolution, as the red banner above their heads reads, it runs along the whole mural, it reads, "Whoever wants to eat must work." However, the three paintings I'm going to discuss, which I've just shown you, from the following years, are very different in atmosphere and subject matter. Odd and ambiguous, one might almost say they go out of their way not to have a message in the way that Rivera's painting did. Now, the following is highly speculative. I'm going to propose, and I hope there will be lots of alternative views expressed by the audience here, but I'm going to propose three sources or contexts, which I think Izquierdo melded together in the most extraordinary way. And these three are, firstly, the work of the 18th century English artist William Blake. Secondly, her friendship with the former Surrealist and inventor of the theatre of cruelty, Antonin Artaud. And finally, the problem of women in the political and cultural nationalism of post-revolutionary Mexico. The visual connections to Blake are specific and could be deliberate quotations, which Izquierdo turns to her own purposes. Both Allegory of Liberty and Allegory of Work adopt the jagged lightning or thunderbolts from Blake's image of Capanius, a king who defied Jupiter and was killed by a thunderbolt. Capanius remains defiant, holding God in disdain, despite being condemned repeatedly to die the same death in Dante's Inferno. In Allegory of Liberty, the winged figure is female and secular rather than an angel, holding a red torch and flying by night away from a chimney spouting poisonous black smoke. Perhaps it's a kind of transformation of Blake's Elohim creating Adam, where Adam is crushed beneath a threatening God. Now, Blake was greatly admired by the Surrealists, not least for his passionate rejection of the myth of an all-powerful creator God. God, for Blake, was the begetter of tyrannical laws upheld by traditional religion and the church. The Surrealists found his attitude sympathetic, as did Izquierdo, who may have been introduced to Blake's work by Artaud. In a lecture Artaud gave at the university in Mexico City in 1936, Surrealism and Revolution, at which Izquierdo was present, he said, "The Surrealist movement has been a deep insurrection against all forms of the father, against the invasive preponderance of the father in behavior and ideas." Izquierdo's paintings are like satirical transformations of Blakean themes. Rather than helpless and betrayed Adam, suffering under a tyrannical god or father, it is women who are helpless under the stars. In Allegory of Work, a naked, despairing woman crouches under a pair of very masculine legs, striding over the volcanic landscape of the Valley of Mexico. These appear to be a reference to Blake's famous Albion Rose on the right-hand side, also known as Glad Day. The giant Albion has a vision of a world in which the idea of liberty for all individuals has been realized. Izquierdo has turned the legs into symbols of oppression and masculine control, suggesting Blake's vengeful God rather than the visionary Albion, with a cosmic globe in place of the genitals. The idea of a cosmic cruelty points to Artaud's theatre of cruelty, which he described as follows: "It's not a question of bringing out the butcher's knife all the time on stage, but of introducing in every aspect of theatre the notion of a sort of cosmic cruelty, without which there would be neither life nor reality." Like Blake, Izquierdo creates vast spaces condensed on a small scale that set the figures free from the demands of perspective and realism. And her style, like Blake's, is deliberately anti-academic and entirely unconventional. Saturn, the final painting from this group, is both a directly disturbing image of torture and a twisting of the classical myth. Saturn, as father of the gods, regularly devoured his own children in a metaphor of the repeating cycle of time. The trapped women, pulling in anguish and rage of despair against their bonds, swing in an endless circle. The women, multi-ethnic of all colors, so women everywhere, are helpless against their fate. The image also has a local reference to the voladores, or flyers, performers who are attached by rope to the top of a high pole and spin spectacularly down to the ground. But in Saturn, the spinning is the opposite of invigorating freedom, rather a form of endlessly repeated subjugation. For Izquierdo, the metaphysical proposition of cosmic cruelty was aligned with the position of women in Mexico, who remained in many places deeply conservative, subordinate, and devout, alongside an embedded culture of machismo. Femicide in Mexico continues to be terrifyingly prevalent. Frida Kahlo's grim painting, Unos cuantos piquetitos, just a few small nips, horribly captures the casual attitude of the macho killer, hand in pocket. It's based on a newspaper account of a trial where the defendant claimed he had just given the woman a few small nips. Kahlo brings the stereotypes of the macho and the chingada, the raped and despised, into ironic conjunction with the festive banner on which the murderer's words are repeated. Izquierdo herself, like a tiny minority in Mexico at the time, was liberated and independent, though with a decidedly personal form of feminism. And I quote, "I am not a classic feminist. I am not one of those who believe that the world of the future should be governed and managed by women only. Neither do I go with the spinster feminists who hate men. I am very far from these two types." However, she did actually challenge male dominance in a very important commission that she received in 1945. This was much desired. It was a commission to paint a mural in a major building in Mexico City. The failure or the suppression of this project was to remain an open wound, as she said, for the rest of her life. The mural, as planned, was undoubtedly a challenge to the muralist tradition. The site was a major public building in the heart of the city on the Great Zocalo Square. The wall space intended for the mural explains its rather odd shape. Izquierdo planned a scene that placed women and the indigenous as the past and present architects. Montezuma, the Aztec emperor at the time of the conquest, is shown carrying a map of the city. It was a real one from the 16th century, of the city of Tenochtitlan, the predecessor to Mexico City. The modern architect, a woman, is dressed soberly, but she's wearing high heels. Izquierdo had a sardonic sense of humor. The theme was not political in the sense of following a party line, but was in other ways too political. To make the indigenous and the female the sole bearers of the idea of the city and of the nation itself was deeply shocking. The complex arrangements for painting a mural, scaffolding, support, technicians, plasterers, and paints were all in place in the staircase, but physical progress was disrupted, and eventually Izquierdo was ordered to stop working before she'd actually started painting. As it turned out, because of the intervention of Rivera and Siqueiros, who complained to the minister in charge. As Carlos Monsiváis said of the cancellation, the greatest disappointment occurred, the big encounter with the machismo that is moral and artistic discrimination. Izquierdo wrote a terrific denunciation of the monopoly of Rivera and Siqueiros in the newspapers. It was very brave, actually, but the experience, which outlined all too clearly the continuing discrimination, marginalization, and suppression of women and women's voices, remained deeply wounding. So to return finally to Izquierdo's dream and foreboding, that it has wider meanings within the national context than the immediate personal nightmare is underlined by Izquierdo's direct reference to the work of Orozco, which, unlike the grand mural projects that celebrated the ideals and notional successes, confronted the real devastation of the Mexican Revolution and its troubled consequences. In the White House, Orozco depicted the terror of the dispossessed and hunted, women above all, during the revolution. Izquierdo draws on the haunted White House and the horrible flayed tree of Orozco's painting, visually and metaphorically linking her severed head and the weeping tresses to deracinated trees. The personal pain, as Izquierdo links her fate to that of Mexico, reverberates with the wider social, political, and cultural issues. And I want to end with a quotation from Robin Greeley's essay, Painting Mexican Identities, Nationalism and Gender, in the work of María Izquierdo, and I quote, "The critical literature treats this image only as a statement of personal anguish. To do so, however, is to relegate the feminine once more to the intellectual periphery and to ignore the implications for national identity evidenced by the picture itself. Izquierdo's aims in Sueño y Presentimiento are much higher. By calling up a pictorial history of her own grapplings with the visualization of Mexico, she forces the feminine into scandalous conjunction with the national."